Get ready for the world's greatest Arsenal podcast. Welcome to another podcast by Guns and Yellow Ribbons. Enjoy the show.
Hello, my name is Fergus. I'm your host. We are on another episode of Guns and Yellow Ribbons, but it's not a normal episode of Guns and Yellow Ribbons. It's an episode looking at the history, the Arsenal history, a special with Andy Kelly and Mark Andrews. And obviously, if we needed our own historian, we got old man Trevor. Hope you enjoyed the show. First of all, welcome Andy, welcome Mark. Thank you very, very much for taking your time out of the close season for joining us. Andy, I'll go to you first. Introduce yourself, a little bit about yourself and how you became an Arsenal fan.
Nice to meet you, Fergus and Trevor, and nice to see you again, Mark. Haven't seen you for a while. So I'm Andy Kelly. I sort of like become over the years someone that has become really, really embroiled in the early history of Arsenal, but also covering, sort of like the whole of the history. And people now seem to look at me as sort of like a go-to person, especially now that Arsenal have lost their historian, Ian Cook. He's left the club a few years ago. But I think, becoming an Arsenal fan is probably very much like most Arsenal fans or most football fans, is it comes from family. My dad was an Arsenal fan. He started going just after the war. And then my brother is 10 years older than me. So my dad got him into going to games in the 60s, which was quite unfortunately because we were pretty rubbish. And then 10 years later, he started taking me, which was equally as unfortunate because we were just as rubbish then. So that's how I became an Arsenal fan.
Mark, yourself, do you want to introduce yourself and how do you become an Arsenal fan?
Hello, yes. All right, chaps. Yeah, and hello, Andy. We haven't seen each other for a while. 1971 FA Cup final was my first game I actually remember watching. And much like Andy, my dad's a fan from 46. I recently went through some stuff with him, and we reckon that the first game he went to, Arsenal were bottom of the league at the start, when 46, 47 season, whatever it was. And the season after that, they won the league. So, our fortunes change. Like Andy, I much prefer Woolwich Arsenal history. I think it's much more interesting. I like that. I love Highbury going there, etc. But I don't know, something about Woolwich that I just find interesting as because it's so old. There's so much. It's so different. It's sort of like there's a different world, isn't it? Basically.
Well, it was the start, wasn't it? It was the start, and we all love to hear and listen about the start of our great football club. And it's interesting you say your first game was in 71, mate, that you remember. My first game I attended was in 1970, December 1970. And I think it was the first time I contacted one of you boys. I can't remember which one of you it was now. My first game was against Wolves in December 1970. And it kicked off at 2:30. And I thought, why is it kicked off at 2:30 on a Saturday? And without even knowing you, I'd drop you boys an email. And within 15, 20 minutes, I had the full details back of why there was general strikes and there was power shortages, and it was brilliant. And ever since then, the work you do has been a big part of my Arsenal reading material and my Arsenal life, actually, because I do live the Arsenal. And that was brilliant that you were able to do that for us. Sorry, Fergus, I butted in again.
That's right. No, it's fine. It's fine. Listen. I'm a newbie completely. As I said to the guys before I started, I got into Arsenal late 80s. Well, probably early 90s when I moved over to England in the late 80s. Met my good wife in the early 90s, and through her family connections, became an Arsenal fan and was living in North London. So Athlone Town is my hometown team, and I still support them to this day, and always will. My uncle played for them in the Europa Cup Winners' Cup or whatever, but that's not what we're here. But Trev, myself and yourself met in the North Bank. We were introduced by Johnny from the North Bank, and we've become, especially over this lockdown and everything else, we've become extremely close friends. We've done this podcast for the last me and you probably for the last 2 years, 18 months at least. But the podcast is about to go into its 4th, 5th season. Mark, Andy, how did you meet? Who wants to go first? Mark, do you want to go first? How did you two guys meet?
To be honest, Andy's better at explaining this one.
Okay, then.
Okay, so there's another guy, Tony Atwood. I don't know if you've heard of Tony Atwood. He's part of ASA, and he used to, or he still does run an Arsenal history blog, and he put various articles up on there. And I think it was I started commenting on them first because I had little extra bits of information that I'd add on to what Tony had. He tended to use the same sources that everyone else was, which was, sort of like old books that have just, regurgitated the same history over and over again. But I had little extra bits to add into that. And then because he was writing about the Arsenal time at Woolwich, he was particularly interested in Henry Norris. Mark started to contribute to the blogs as well, because Mark's got this particular interest in Woolwich as well. And then Tony could obviously see that we had a little bit more than the usual fan who has a bit of an interest in the history of the club. So we sort of like got together that way, and he started bringing the pair of us, or bringing the pair of us together to help him with writing his articles. And then Mark and we had a chat offline, and we seemed to get on really well. We both knew a fair amount about the club in its early days. Mark, you wrote a thesis about it, didn't you?
Yes. It sort of dovetailed really, because I prefer off-field stuff, and Andy does all the stats. So I did the crowd. My thesis was on the crowd at Arsenal in Plumstead. Basically, it was to see whether there was football hooliganism starting from, because I wrote it in 1990 for the BMA. It was really there to see if football hooliganism had carried on, because obviously up to 1990 there was quite a lot of hooliganism on the terraces, and there was different theories about whether it was a linear progression or whether it had just started in the 60s, and effectively it did start in the 60s in reality. There was a little bit beforehand, but nothing of the same beforehand. So I say, Andy was into all the players, who played, etc., and I liked all the off-field stuff. So we just dovetailed really well. And we was pretty much the same. I mean, you're saying about the stats. Virtually all the stats are Andy's. They're not. I do I do quite a lot of the writing, and Andy's got the backing data information, and that's generally how we work.
And one thing that we found, one thing that happened, I stumbled across it really, was just a tiny little piece of information in an article that Tony wrote that wasn't right, but it was ingrained in Arsenal's history. And it was about a particular player who was supposed to have played in a particular game and been offered professional terms by Derby County. And if you look back through Arsenal's history, it's the sort of like the turning point of the club's history. It forced them into becoming professional, which was a big thing back then in 1890-91, because the game in the south of the country was all amateurs, whereas the professionals only played in the North and the Midlands in the Football League. But what I found was that this player that was allegedly offered professional terms by Derby after an FA Cup game didn't actually play in that game for Arsenal, because he wasn't an Arsenal player at the time. And I thought, well, that's strange, isn't it? And then I started finding other little bits that were not quite right in Arsenal's early history. And so between Tony, Mark and myself, we got together all these things that weren't quite right, and we thought perhaps there's a book here. And so that spurred us on to write Woolwich Arsenal, the club that changed football. But even as we were writing that, we were finding out so much more that we almost had a prequel to it, which we'll come on to later. So, but anyway, we wrote this book about Woolwich Arsenal, so Arsenal's time from when they were from 1893 up to 1915. And then we had a little bit of a split, I suppose. It was like most big pop groups have the odd split here and there. Mark and I decided that we wanted to write in our way. Tony had his own way of writing. Mark and we decided that we wanted to do it our way, which was slightly different, and so we sort of like splintered off and formed our own website, thearsenalhistory.com.
And so you've mentioned it. Firstly, two things you talk about there, boys, that interest me. People don't realise that the game down south, when it was first invented, was very much a posh man's game, wasn't it? You know, people think it was a working man's game. Well, it may have started off as a working man's game up north, but down south, from what I've seen, and you boys will put me right, it was very much a posh man's sport. So, but moving on to the Arsenal history. So, what did you two just get together one day and say, right, we'll write this book about the Arsenal history? Were all those statistics in the book readily available, or did you have to really go on a search to find them?
There weren't too many statistics in that particular book. It was mostly stories.
Sorry.
So there weren't that many. That a lot of them weren't available at the time. We would, like I say, it was constantly changing as we were writing it, because as we were researching it, we were finding out more and more information, and a lot of this information went against what had been previously written. You know, if you read our book, compare it to the official Arsenal history, they're completely different.
Yeah.
And I've got a couple of books that I've done a little bit on here, which was the Royal Arsenal with Mark, Andy, until Tim Stillman was he edited it for you, I think, and then you got Arsenal, the complete record, which is right in front of Trevor right now, which Josh James, yourself, and Mark were involved in. Mark, asking you about the Royal Arsenal, that book was talking more about the champions of the South and talking about what you're saying, the way the game was, like there was a northern game and a southern game, and I've watched. I know it's only a Hollywood movie, but is it the English gentleman's game with England, and it depicts the way football was then? Is that how it was from your research?
Is that a Netflix?
It might have been, yeah. The one,
yeah. I didn't bother. I didn't. Oh, yeah, I was going to start with it. And I thought I can't be bothered with that.
Sorry.
Yeah, there's an element of truth in that. I mean, if you think about it, football split off. There was two types of football. There was rugby football and association football. So yeah, Trevor's completely correct. It started more as a middle class game, but it was quickly taken over by the working class. Because you know the two games, and it's difficult because me and Andy out quite a lot at the start. Is quite often you'd find a team in Woolwich that you thought were a football team, an association football team, and they turned out to be a rugby team because they didn't have the same scoring system as I have now. You know, the scores would be 2-1, say, and you'd think, oh, that's a football match, but it was a rugby match, and the two codes were quite similar. Because obviously they came from one code, and you know they were very, very violent. But the working class generally took over association football, not rugby football.
Why was that?
Why that specific game I don't know. Why they took it over was greater leisure from about 1880s, and that the working class were given half a day off on a Saturday. Specifically at Woolwich, that type of thing happened. They had people worked from till 1 o'clock on a Saturday. They'd steam off down the pub, have a few pints, and then go and watch football, which is pretty much like
what we do now. Yeah,
no, it was pretty much the same until they bunged in stands everywhere to 1990s. Football really didn't change that much. People went on the terraces, had a few pints, and that was it. I mean, I know people have pints now, but it's a bit more gentrified. The stadiums, aren't they?
Yes.
I miss the terraces badly. I was raised on the terraces.
Yeah,
The first time I attended, I was in the West Lower. I think it was the season after they put the seating in. But I was raised on the terraces, and I miss the terraces badly. That's why my season ticket at Arsenal was in Block 7, because they let us stand there, and makes it. It's a completely different experience. People that never experienced the terraces of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. From my memory, I'm talking. They You couldn't explain it to them. You could tell them the story about starting off at the back of the North Bank and as a 14-year-old ending up halfway down after the first goal and actually near the front half of the second goal, you know. And that moment of panic, I always used to have a moment of panic when the squeeze came on, you know. The squeeze and then the movement went, you know, and you were all playing with the movement. But, you know, you talk about the history, the early days. I know you boys were into the early days. Our first season in Division 2, the Arsenal, was like we were the only Southern club in there, and it was like the mid 1890s. It must have been an expensive game for Arsenal Football Club league, an expensive league for Arsenal Football Club to be in. Because I mean, every week they're travelling hundreds and hundreds of miles. They must have had some kind of financial backing or something going on because, wow, they did ever so well, didn't they? I mean, there's no short trip there, is there?
So Andy, give us an idea of the founders, and it come out of the munitions factory at Woolwich. Take us from there and give us a rundown of how we ended up being in Woolwich as Woolwich Arsenal.
Well, we actually never played in Woolwich, funnily enough. All our games were played in Plumstead, which didn't get absorbed by Woolwich until the early 1900s. But as you say, that the team was formed as part of within the Royal Arsenal within a factory called Dial Square. They had a cricket team, and in the summer of 1886, or at the end of the 1886 cricket season, they had a smoking concert, which was basically a bit of a boys' night out, and to celebrate the end of the season. And they decided to form a football club to give them something to do during the winter. So it took them a couple of months to get it. Sorry.
How did they fund that? Like what Trevor's talking about, like it was a Northern League and there was a Midlands League and no Southern League. How did they actually fund that?
They didn't start in the league, Fergus. That was the first few seasons. They weren't in the league, were they? But boys, I'm butting in. It's all about you two. Tell us about
as Trevor says, there's the first few seasons we just played friendlies. And certainly the first season it was just friendlies. So they were playing on Plumstead Common. It was jumpers for goalposts. And they scraped together 11 players. The only good thing was that there were some quite good footballers because they were attracted down to the Royal Arsenal by good wages. The Arsenal could attract skilled people, and within the first 2 or 3 seasons, Arsenal suddenly became really, really successful as an amateur team. Playing within sort of the London Cups. There was no league, and they were able to attract players from up north to come and play for them with a promise of getting a good wage at the Arsenal, saying they'd pretend that they were skilled craftsmen. Whether or not they were, we don't really know, but they got them jobs at the Arsenal. And then in 1891 it got to the stage where the players that were coming down to play for Arsenal were so good that the teams from the Midlands and the North were trying to poach them. So throughout the whole of the 1890-91 season, we had clubs coming down and trying to take our players away from us, which they could quite easily do, as ours were amateurs. So it's in 1891 that the committee of the club decided to turn professional and start paying players.
Oh, wow. And Blackheath, I believe we played on Blackheath as well, Mark, didn't we? Before we went across the river? No? Am I wrong in that?
No.
Yeah. Boys, you're probably gathering Fergus is always wrong, right? I have to carry Fergus through these podcasts. As much as I love the man dearly, he's a very close friend. I have to carry.
I must admit, this was a frightening episode that I was worried about. Trev said it was a great idea. I said, yes, fantastic, Trev, but I haven't got a clue. I said, I'm a newbie.
No, I mean, going back to your finance question. It seems as if sort of between 1887 and just before they went into the league, the Woolwich Arsenal, as Andy alluded to, basically gave them a massive help. They took players on for them. They had them playing for Arsenal, and they were paying a a decent wage for a working man in those days. At the same time, then you sort of had a number of benefactors. So you effectively, George Lawrence was a benefactor from 1893 onwards. There's a couple of other people. Who was that bloke who died, Andy? I can't remember. Gage, was it?
Tom Gage.
Yeah. So there was people in there, and they put a lot of money into the club. And then you had basically the chief one after sort of when the Boer War was George Levy, who put a colossal amount of money into the club. And it was only really when in 1910, when he said, "I've had enough. I've put £15,000 into the club. I can't carry on anymore." That gave Norris and the Fulham directors the chance to come in and save Arsenal, because they had liquidated themselves, but chiefly because George Levy just said, I cannot do this anymore.
I looked at you. Hang on one second, Trev. I looked at your website, and because you mentioned Norris and the Fulham thing, and I looked at your website, thearsenalhistory.com, and I find it really interesting, the facts, the amount of stats and everything on there. But I was going through, is it true, is it not, and the one about Fulham merging with Arsenal, and Norris wanted to merge Fulham and Arsenal. Andy, do you want to expand on that, or Mark? Who wants to choose?
Well, funnily enough, we've found something in the last few days that has sort of changed our view on it just a little bit.
Okay.
So basically what happened was in early 1910, George Levy has said, "Look, I can't keep putting this money into the club." What had happened in the previous 5 years, Arsenal had been the first Southern club to join the Football League, and then the first Southern club to get into the First Division. And they had 3 or 4 really good years at the start, around about 1905 to 1908 in the First Division. But then a couple of things happened. First was that we stopped going to war. So we'd been in wars for so many years, and then and the area was quite affluent because there were lots of people working in the Woolwich Arsenal, in the Arsenal armaments factory, and they had loads of money to spend. Apart from around the time of the Boer War, which is when George Levy got involved in the club, but then they had a good few years when everything was going well. But then, like I say, the country stopped going to war, and so the people that worked in the Royal Arsenal were being laid off left, right, and centre. And then the hardcore of the Arsenal fans worked in the torpedo factory, and that was moved lock, stock, and barrel up to Greenock in Scotland. So, and also Chelsea joined the league, and their ground was much more accessible to the floating supporter, and they got quickly promoted into the First Division. So if you look at our attendances from 1905, they're up here, and then they sharply dived. By 1910, we were only getting half the amount of people going to our games. And you look at Chelsea's attendances, they rocketed because they'd got into the First Division. And like I say, it was more accessible. So, and as Mark said, George Levy had put an amazing amount of money into the club, and he said, "That's it. It's just got to stop." And his idea was to refinance the club and get more, getting some people that were willing to put money into the club. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And 3 directors from Fulham came along and said, "Look, we can see you've got dire financial problems. We're willing to come in and help support the club." And 2 of those were William Hall and Henry Norris, and the 3rd director bowed out quite early. So Henry Norris was the front man, and William Hall was sort of like they were 50-50 partners throughout the whole of the time they were involved at Arsenal. But Norris was the front man, and so he could see that the problem was Arsenal's location, based in Woolwich. It was not an easy place to get to even today, and the story goes that they tried to do 2 things. One was to get Arsenal to relocate to Craven Cottage and play their home games there. But at the time, George Levy was still on the board of directors, and he said, "No, as long as I'm here, Arsenal stay in Plumstead." And the other story was that Norris wanted to get Fulham and Arsenal to merge, so that then he gets his first division team. So the team, he's got a lot of shares in Fulham as well. He would then have one super team that would play in the first division for him, because he was chairman of Fulham at the time, and they were a second division team. But according to the story, the Football League said, no, you can't do that, because if you want to merge, you'll have to take Fulham's place in the second division. But as I said earlier on, we just found out that didn't quite happen that way. Norris didn't put that proposal to the Football League. They may probably have discussed it, but they knew that that's what the Football League would say to them. So they didn't actually take that proposal to the Football League.
Okay. Trav, you were going to say something.
Yeah, strangely enough, I knew that we were just about to move on to Norris. But it was like hitting a joviality, boys. Any truth in the fact that Forest gave us our red shirts?
No.
And I sort of knew that in my head, really, anyway. But it's a lovely old story to think about. But Fergus, I just want to dwell on Norris, because Norris, from me as a fan who doesn't know the history like you boys, Norris was really the formation of modern Arsenal, wasn't he? This was the start of the football club that we start to even remember in our lifetimes. So was he the tough guy that everyone makes him out to be, or was he just a very clever man, or was he just a passionate football man? What's your boys' opinions on that?
Do you want to answer that one, Mark?
I don't know. It's difficult to say, really. I mean, he was initially a lawyer's clerk, and he worked his way up, and then he started building houses. So he made his money through building houses, basically, and building them in different estates around London and the southeast. I don't know. There's not that much. I mean, the only place where it really says about is him being, use my words carefully here, a bit of a, what's the word for it? A bit dogmatic. Is Knighton's biography, where he goes through things and he says he's like Napoleon. He was, it was short and aggressive, etc., etc. But I mean, he obviously was a bit of a handful, because he did come back when he got kicked out of football. He used to come to the Arsenal, because I think, I don't know if it's just shared, but he used to ask a lot of questions of people. But I think there's a bit of a, I mean, as Andy alluded to before, is Norris and Hall were a partnership, and Hall was very, very much in the back room. He used to be on all the FA and Football League committees. He used to do a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and Norris was the voice. You saw someone, it was Norris. You didn't see Hall, but I think we tend to think that Hall did most of the machinery behind to get Arsenal into a decent position, like the 1919 election.
So it would appear that Norris, as you said, was like edging for a move and looked, and moving out of Woolwich had to be done. Whose decision was it, and what and why did they choose Highbury? Why did they choose that area? I'll go to you, Andy, just because Mark spoke a second ago.
Yeah. Okay. So as I said, Norris was looking to move Arsenal out of Woolwich to start, or out of Plumstead to start with, because he could see that the fan base had gone, and he did say that he'd keep the club there if the fans came back and they supported the club. And in 1912, George Levy finally said, that's it. I've had enough of Arsenal Football Club. I've got to concentrate on my business. He was a gentleman's outfitters. He had several shops in the Woolwich area, but also up and down the country. And it was it's sort of it's during the summer of 1912. And it was at that point then that Norris had the full ability to say, all right, let's think about a move. But he kept it quiet. And at the start of the 1912-13 season was appalling. It's Arsenal's worst season ever. They only won 3 games in the whole of the season in the Football League. and the crowds just continued to go and go, and they were just never coming back. So it was that point that Norris decided that Arsenal had to move, and there were a number of sites that were talked about. One was White City Stadium, that got a fair amount of coverage. The other was over that way. And another was Haringey, Green Lane. I don't know if you know how well you know London or the Green Lanes area.
Yeah. I was born 2 minutes away from Haringey Dog Track, mate. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was going to be that was proposed as one of the locations for us to move to. So imagine how much closer that is to Tottenham's ground than Highbury is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then one day it was announced that Arsenal were moving to Highbury, and there was a newspaper report that was dug up. It was after we wrote our book, unfortunately, but I think it was in the Daily Mirror. It was either Daily Mirror or Daily Express, and it said that Arsenal are just about to appoint a new director, and it gave the indication that this director who was about to be appointed was the one who put Norris onto the area in Highbury, where the new ground was built, and his name was Charles Crisp. So he was quite a well-known man in the football circles. He'd been around for donkey's years. He'd been a player, and then he became an administrator. And he lived along Holloway Road, so going up towards Archway. So he obviously knew the area quite well. So he must have had a few people, must have known people around the area that knew that St John's College, where we moved to, that they were having financial difficulties as well. So it was like two organisations that were in financial dire straits, and it worked out, really well for both of us. Arsenal got a new ground with, a real good fan base in the local area, and St John's College got a new tenant that kept them afloat.
And we upset Tottenham in the process, which is always a pleasant thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always good.
Which is quite ironic because they were in Middlesex. We were a London team, they're a Middlesex team. I'm not sure what they were complaining about. It's our turf, not theirs.
They're still a Middlesex team in my view. So there we go. So if we moved over there in 1924, was it? I think
1913.
So no. In 1913, I know that. In 1925, we appointed the now late Sir Herbert Chapman as manager. He came from Huddersfield Town, where he was manager from 1912 to Leeds 1912 to 18, 21 to 25 at Huddersfield Town. Mark, talk a bit about Sir Herbert.
Wait a second. I often cut him off.
Stopped. There we go.
Because I've got to show a bit of knowledge here. Did you know, and I hope these boys don't shoot me down because I'll be going red by a second. Did you know that Herbert Chapman actually played for Tottenham, Fergus?
Yep.
Yes.
He actually played for Tottenham.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that must have made him even more annoyed when he turned out to do the most.
Sadly, when I named one of the stray cats we took in, that my wife insisted we took in, I said, the only reason you can have the cat come in if I call it Sir Herbert Chapman. It's now known as Herbie. And my daughter said, what, you're going to name a cat after a Tottenham player? I went, no, it's the greatest Arsenal manager before Wenger. And played for Tottenham. She knew. She Googled it just to wind me up. Mark, talk a bit about Herbert Chapman.
Well, the interesting bit you said about Leeds, he actually got banned from football for life whilst he was there, which was then rescinded. Because they were...
Really?
I think after the First World War, they were done for all sorts of financial irregularities, or it might have been during the war. But he actually was banned for quite a while, but he got it rescinded because he proved that he wasn't actually part of the club when they had basically it was a blanket ban. Anybody involved with the running or whatever just got banned because it was so what they were doing was so iffy. But he got that back, went to Huddersfield, came to our place. To my view, he is the greatest Arsenal manager, purely because he got us from effectively being a nothing team who had a big name. And also, under Knighton, we did used to get big crowds. We, 1 or 2 seasons in the 6 seasons he managed, we had the highest support in the land. There's no question about it. We were a very, very popular team, but we weren't a big team. We almost got relegated. He came in, had a 5-year plan. In the 5th year, we won the FA Cup. We won the league twice with him excessive. Who knows what he would have won if he hadn't died when he did.
Yeah, that was sudden, wasn't it? Just let me finish this question before you answer, boys, because I don't want you to think I'm going too far with this. Herbert Chapman and Arsene Wenger, right? Were they comparable simply from a perspective in that the early days of Wenger's reign and Chapman's reign, they had a massive impact because they were so ahead of their time. Their ideas was at that period of time was so ahead of anyone else's, and that's what made Arsenal successful. Would that be a good line of thought, or shoot me down?
Oh, I know what Mark would say to
that. Feel free, boys. It's a podcast. We're here to discuss.
Yeah. I mean, I personally would say, I can see exactly that. They both had, ideas. They were innovators, and they brought success to the club.
Yeah,
I mean, the main difference is that Chapman brought Arsenal up from the bootstraps, and Wenger just took a relatively successful club and made them decent for 10 years.
But the argument there is, if Chapman had Arsenal for 22 years, would people be looking back? And you don't need to answer this, either one of you, but you can if you want. If Chapman had Arsenal for 22 years, would he have been as successful as Wenger? And would he have been pilloried as much as Wenger was in his latter years? Personally, myself, my era is Rioch, Graham, Wenger, and there afterwards. And I think the sun shines out of Arsene Wenger's derriere. So, yes, I think he overstayed his welcome in the end, but that's neither here nor there. But could you see Chapman, if he had the club for 10 or 15 years even, doing much more than he did already, Mark?
Well, he technically did, because even though he died, he set up a boot room, which was pre the Liverpool boot room of the 70s. Basically, they copied Chapman's way of doing things. So he had a coterie of people: Allison, Whittaker, a couple of others, Shaw in the background, who were doing, who basically were all basically a brains trust. So they worked together. Chapman died. George Ellison takes over. Arsenal win 2 league. Shaw took over for a while. In the 30s, Arsenal won the league 5 times and the FA Cup twice. But Chapman had died halfway through it. Second World War comes. We lose untold number of players. Not obviously top line players, because a lot of the players who died were people who were coming through, because it's the fact that the younger men. But they lost a lot of players, and also a lot of older players like Drake, who probably could have carried on, were injured during the war, playing football and whatever else. So when the football started again, very few of the original players from the start of the war were still playing. Whittaker took over. He won 2 leagues and 1 FA Cup. Now, at that point, you couldn't win anything other than the league or the FA Cup. So in that period till Whittaker died in 56, we won a lot of trophies, a hell of a lot of trophies. In fact, what was it? Was it 7? It was 7 league and 3 cup, wasn't it?
We were unlucky not to win the double in 52.
Yeah,
we reached the cup final, and Wally Barnes got injured early on in the game, so we played the game with 10 men, and there's no substitutes back then. And we came 3rd in the league, but it was going into the last game of the season. If the results had gone right, we would have won the league.
Yeah. So I mean, in my mind, he was he took Arsenal up and brought Arsenal up, but B, he left a legacy. Wenger hasn't done that. 2000.
Do you not think?
No,
he hasn't. No, I agree.
We've gone downhill so fast, in footballing terms, since he left. It's like almost like, I mean, you can't describe it with Ferguson, because I think Ferguson was an exceptional manager because just through the number of trophies he won. But Wenger was. I mean, I started not liking him very much from 2006 after the Champions League, because you could just see that everything he did was starting not to work. Do
you know what, mate? I'm going to support you here, and you. What you say, I couldn't agree with you more, mate. I'm sorry I cut you off there. Don't lose the line because it's important. But Wenger, I can't say a bad word about him. I can't really be horrible about him, but then I can't be horrible about anybody involved with Arsenal Football Club. Ferguson knows that very well. But he did outstay his welcome by a long time. And I wonder, we won't dwell on Wenger, but let me just sow this seed.
Because there's so many other managers as well. There's George Graham and someone that I want to talk about as well. So, yeah.
I just want to sow this seed for later. Did we become a bit of an experiment for Wenger in his later years? Was he just toying with us and seeing where he could go? Keep that in your mind, Mark, but let Fergus take it back a minute.
So after Whittaker, when is the last trophy we won? We went through Crayson, Swindon, Wright, Bertie Mee, Terry Neal, Don Howe, Burton Shaw, and then we got to George Graham. Anything before we get to George Graham that was of any significance, important? Listen, it's Arsenal Football Club. Everything's important.
Well, obviously, Bertie Mee was somewhat influential.
But with Bertie Mee, it wasn't just Bertie Mee. It was Don Howe in the background. He had the best right-hand man in the business. And when you look at what happened with, Bertie Mee took over in his first season. He had Dave Sexton as his coach. And Sexton quit, and Don Howe took over. And you look at what happened to Arsenal when Don Howe was the coach. They reached the League Cup final in '68 and lost against Leeds, who were probably the best team in the country at the time. '69 was a disaster. They reached another cup final, though, League Cup final, lost to Swindon. 1970, they won the Fairs Cup. 71, they won the double, and then Don Howe left. And the decline was very, very quick.
Hang on, Trev. I did line myself up to get shot down there because I did have the double in. I did have the 71 double lined up to talk about as well. So yeah, carry on.
Did Mee break that team up too soon, Andy?
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely, I agree.
Definitely, yeah. And the coaches that he had with him, Steve Burtonshaw, Bobby Campbell was quite liked by the players, but Steve Burtonshaw wasn't up to it. And you listen to what the players say. Don Howe was the man. When he came back in 1977. Arsenal reached the cup final. Unfortunately, we lost to Ipswich. Following season, we reached the cup final and beat Man United. And the season after that, we reached 2 cup finals. Unfortunately, we lost. But Don Howe's time there, we did an awful lot of. We reached a lot of cup finals and we won trophies.
Yeah,
Mark.
Yeah, Don Howe was the archetypal coach who shouldn't have been a manager, wasn't he?
Yeah,
he was a second in command. He was fantastic. Could teach everybody what to do, but as a leader, he wasn't managerial. You could argue that's Arteta, couldn't you? But I don't know.
Listen, I work in the sales industry, and sometimes your finest salesperson is promoted to be a manager, and they crash and burn because a salesperson is skilled in what they do, but they're not necessarily skilled in managing people. And you could have the most meek and mild person that can be the greatest leader. Listen, jumping ahead probably a little bit. You look at I listened to Sol Campbell recently on Talk Sport, and he's pushing to try and get back into managerial jobs. And I listened to him and I thought, how can that man be the captain of Arsenal Invincibles? How can that man be like an England captain? He didn't sound very inspiring at all, but he must have something to make people follow him. And I don't know. That's
Yeah, well, you can take that a long way. I mean, Tony Adams, fantastic player, but as a manager or coach, I don't think he's. Yeah. And the same, and you could look at the Charlton brothers. Bobby Charlton was infinitely a better player, but Jack Charlton was so much a better manager. Bobby Moore as well, fantastic, brilliant player, but his managerial career, nowhere. It's just strange. Mourinho didn't really play a lot, did he? But even as you don't like him, he was a brilliant manager for a while.
Yeah, Sheffield Wednesday to Leicester in a week I had to do because of Jack Charlton and his bloody Sheffield Wednesday third division team. on the trains were on strike. It was a nightmare. But I got to every day. It was special time then. Special time, yeah.
Listen, the books that we're talking about, the first book we talked about was The Royal Arsenal. I haven't got a picture of the Woolwich Arsenal, the club that changed football, but I have got a picture of what Trevor's covering his microphone with and what he's...
I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not sure. I use it, mate. I use it. I'm indebted to these two guys.
It's your Bible, and if you want to see more of it, the Arsenal history, telling it like it really was. It's not about trying to be sensationalized. It's just saying these are the facts and so on. So listen, we talk about stadium.
Ferg, wait. That website. You got to tell people, give people a warning about that Arsenal history website. Don't start looking at it if you've only got 5 minutes. Because if you're an Arsenal fan, and you start looking at it, it sort of draws you in and you find yourself clicking from bit to bit and putting sort of a picture together in your head, and you can do it all and you're clicking about and you don't go on there if you've only got 5 minutes because you'll be stuck on it for hours, I'm telling you. And that's a compliment to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
I must admit, I'm really guilty. I'm really guilty of that. I've done the exact same thing. Go on, Mark.
But it's just a shame we haven't got time. We haven't got a lot of time to do more and more stuff, is it, Andy? Because we're both working. And I mean, I don't know about you, but with the lockdown, and work's been not a nightmare, but it's been quite full on for quite a while now. So
I've been stuck in this room for about 18 months.
The complete record book, this book, boys, is there a plan for, because obviously you boys know once you write a statistical book, it's not long before there's more to add. So is there a plan for an updated version every so often? Like that'd be fantastic if there was.
Well, the publisher has said that they found that the updated versions don't tend to sell particularly well. Okay. So it's a bit reluctant to put one out for a while.
Right. Okay.
I mean, we'd like to do it. I've got different things to put into it now. So I've started putting times of goal scorers in there. I found a few little not errors, but that things are not quite right. So half-time scores, some of them are round the wrong way, and the club's official records are wrong. So where they say that a player scored a penalty, he didn't actually score a penalty. There's quite a lot of them in the 60s, strangely, but there's penalties that were shown as penalties and goals that weren't shown as penalties that were penalties.
That's it. Then now I know it's not true. Well,
and the other thing that we found quite a bit is the more you look into, because obviously the digitisation of papers has made it a lot easier to look at stats like this and other bits and pieces. But in that book, we put the number of people who were killed or wounded in both wars, and we found a couple of other players who aren't in there who we would like to add. But obviously, until there's another version, they won't be in there.
By all means, you can mention them on here tomorrow. We're recording this on Saturday, but tomorrow is the 77th anniversary of D-Day. So I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So by all means, Mark, if you've got the names to hand, mention them now.
Fergus.
They're all in our file. They're all in our file. I can send you the names later. But there's 2 or 3 people, and there's a few others.
We'll give them a mention. It's important that those people are known. I've got this thing going around the back of my head, right? I think, Fergus, I think we've just jumped a little bit too far because we've not mentioned the fantastic stadium at Highbury, which will hopefully be preserved in some shape or form forever. Although it makes me sad actually, when I look at it nowadays. It makes me smile, then it makes me sad because I have to walk past it and not into it. Boys, tell me about what you found out about the building of the stadium. What made them pull down that original East Stand? Well, they built the West Stand first, I know, but what made them go for something that was years ahead of its time and could have been built probably for a quarter of the price it was? What was the driving force behind the building those two beautiful stands, mate?
I think it was Herbert Chapman.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just wanted the best club. He was like a showman as well, and he wanted Arsenal to be the best.
Yeah.
And so it was his vision, but unfortunately he died before most of it was finished. So he could see that the ground needed to be extended. Arsenal were getting bigger and bigger crowds, so the North Bank was extended further back, and that's where the story of the horse being pulled into the pit at the back of the North Bank was come from. Originally, everyone thought it was the original building of the stadium, but it wasn't. The story comes from when it was extended further back around about 1930. Although we've not found any evidence to say that definitely happened yet. We're still looking. But also, he wanted people when they turned up at Arsenal to look at it and go, wow. And if you listen to players that have ever played there, opposing players, they come in and they've all said, you go to Highbury and you know that you're at Highbury, when you go into the marble halls.
And it must unfortunately as well.
Sorry?
Attractive players. It might a player must have heard, Arsenal are interested in me. I'm going. I'm playing at Highbury. I'm going to play for Arsenal.
Yeah, the changing rooms had underfloor heating. What sort of luxury is that? That from the 1930s, and players loved going. Well, the opposing players didn't because their changing rooms weren't heated. Arsenal's ones were.
Fantastic.
Yeah. But the little known fact is, the steps at the front of the East Stand that go up to the marble halls.
Yeah.
On the original plans, they extended too far out onto the pavement, and so the plans had to be adjusted. And rather than redraw the whole plans, the architect he drew fewer steps on a little piece of paper and then just glued them over the top of the steps that were on the plan, rather than redraw it, and he just submitted that.
Brilliant. Wow. I used to love the way the players could get close to you, and the amount of games I went to at Highbury, and evening games in particular. And I can remember Righty one night throwing his shirts out the window. And I went to a testimonial once. I can't remember who it was, boys, to be honest, but Righty was playing, and the game was a bit late kicking off because by all accounts he'd thrown all the shirts out the dressing room window before the game. So they had to shoot down the club shop and get a load more printed up quick. I don't know if it's been that.
I think that was Nigel Winterburn's testimonial. Apparently it's true.
Oh, fantastic.
I had a Legends tour of the Emirates Stadium, and Winterburn mentioned that, and he did say it was true. Listen, the stadium saw some fantastic memories. The double winning year of 71. We had 79, and obviously then you go up to 89. It was a tragic year for football, but a fantastic year for Arsenal Football Club. We had Tony Adams and O'Leary scoring that penalty. Mark, do you want to talk a little about 89?
In what way?
Were you? Sorry, were you there?
There's not a lot you can say that hasn't been said, is there? Really? I mean,
not really.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't go to them. I went to most of the matches, or most of the home matches that season. Because the question you were saying before was that was the main time that I went to Arsenal was 88 to 94.
Okay.
So I chose quite a good time to sort of start going frequently.
So Sunshine supporter then, Mark, yeah?
Huh?
Joke.
Well,
Sunshine supporter.
you could say that, yeah. No. I mean, what can you say about 89? It hasn't. It's just like
true.
It's just unbelievable. But when you think back on it, we went out of Highbury after the Derby game and we lost that, and you think, oh, it's not very good. and then the Wimbledon game, which we drew, and you think, well, it's all over. But as Andy has pointed out on our website, that West Ham scored a goal against Liverpool, which meant rather than us even 3 goals, we needed 2. So
West Ham had a big input. Yeah, because I remember that game like it was yesterday, Liverpool scoring those goals against West Ham and thinking, well, it's really gone now. And I would love to say that I went to that game in 89, you know. I could say that I went to that game in 89.
Everyone does.
Yeah.
Boys, I didn't. I sat at home and watched it on the telly with my kids because I didn't think we had a hope in hell, to be honest. And I'll never forgive myself for that. But you see, we'd had the League Cup finals. Is it the 2 years before we beat Liverpool, didn't we? And then we lost to Luton. That was my worst ever visit to Wembley, losing to Luton. That was my worst ever visit to Wembley. It was horrible day. O'Leary was injured, I can remember, and so Gus Caesar came in, and then history wasn't made. But then 89, we done that, and then. But what people forget is 91. I think the 91 side was probably a better side. Very nearly the first Invincible
game, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Would you agree?
They were a proper team. They were, a proper unit, weren't they? As to go only lose 1 game in the league throughout a season is absolutely fantastic. And they did it because they all had a job to do, and they all went out and did it. They were not. Limpar was the fancy Dan, but the rest of them, they just did the job.
Yeah.
And you're talking about your worst visit to Wembley. My worst visit to Wembley was that year when we lost to that lot up the road in the semi-final of the FA Cup.
Oh yeah, that was terrible.
Oh. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me that, Andy. I'm over the moon. Yeah.
I was severely hungover at the time, and it was in the shade at Wembley, and the wind was whistling round. I just didn't want to be there. I was sat there going, "Oh, I don't want to be here."
Still, it's quite good 2 years later.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about the games you've attended. Do you still attend games now? Or like, I know there's a lot of people who frequented Highbury, and as Mark said, people fell out of love with Arsenal and football a lot when the terraces disappeared and the Premier League came in, and a gradual gentrification of football. Do you guys still frequent games now? How regularly? Are you season ticket holders? Mark?
I was. My brother bought one in 14, I think, and we had it for 5 years. And then I don't know. It's just not the same because in terraces you could move about, you could do this, you could do that. I mean, to be honest with you, I go watch Bromley quite often. I prefer going to see Bromley play football, not the football, but the things. I can go with my dad. We can sit down, we can stand up. If you go to Arsenal, you have to go to the bit that's the same place every time. I mean, okay, you can stand up, Trev. You're quite right if you're in the lower levels, but our season ticket was in the upper North Bank, and I don't know. It just wasn't. It's just not. It's not the same as it was in the 80s and 90s, and I don't know. It's just not. It's not as enjoyable watching it. I mean, you might as well once they brought seats in, you might as well have been able to watch every game on the telly because it's the same thing, really. Okay, you can have a bit, because some games are good, but most of it's just great. Go through the motions, blah blah blah. I mean, which game did you go to, Andrew? It was shocking. The 0-0, wasn't it? A while ago, and you said that's it for me.
It seems to be every time I go now. I say I just can't do it anymore. The atmosphere is so poor. I suppose for us that are of a certain age, we can remember. You go to the 87-88 Littlewoods Cup semi-final against Everton. The place was absolutely heaving. It was absolutely rocking. And I know it wasn't like that every week, but it was like quite a regular thing. But even when it was, sort of like a poor crowd, there'd still be a bit of an atmosphere there. But you go now and you just can't get it going because, as you say, as Mark says, you're all sitting down, and it's just difficult to get it rocking.
let's be fair, boys. Let's be. I always play a bit of devil's advocate with the fans because the Emirates isn't built for an atmosphere. The Emirates was built to make corporate money. We've got executive boxes all the way around the stadium. There's no break in them. We've got club level all around the stadium. There's no break in it. And yeah, I have heard the Emirates rock, but it is difficult for the fans. It is difficult for the fans. And you just made me smile there, Andy, mentioning the 87-88 League Cup semi-final against Everton at Highbury, the leg at Highbury. I was on the clock in that night, and I remember it vividly. I remember it very well. It was the best atmosphere I saw at Highbury. I was not fortunate enough to go to the game to the Fairs Cup final that they all say was the best atmosphere. I wasn't there for that. I was too young, but. That of all the games, if you said to me, "What's the best atmosphere I ever experienced at Highbury?" It would be that night. It would be that final against Everton. It was an amazing, amazing evening to be an Arsenal fan. And do you know what? I differ slightly for the reasons that I get fed up with football nowadays, Mark, Andy. Sometimes I do think to myself, "God, why am I going?" But I always enjoy it when I'm there, and I always love meeting up with the lads and watching the football. I do enjoy still watching it. What puts me off nowadays is that the outside influences, the money, the rich owners, the countries owning football clubs, and the play acting from the players diving on the floor. And I know it's all the modern game, and we're going to have to accept it. That's what puts me off more than anything. It puts me off greatly. I moan about it relentlessly. Money and play acting, and the fact that TV rules football nowadays. You look at a fixture list at the start of the season. When next season's fixture list comes out soon, you might as well just pick it up and tear it into pieces because, we're probably, they're all going to move. Football TV is going to come along at the last minute and say, right, we'll move that, we'll move that, we'll move that, we'll move that. And that's what really bugs me about the modern game, as I like to call it.
Well, if you think about football, it's quite a simple game, isn't it? You kick a ball and it's not like rugby or cricket where it's got specific rules and you have to understand certain things technically. Football's really simple. And for me, football was always about going out, having a few beers beforehand, going on the terraces, having a sing, going home. And that was it, really. The football, in many ways, is incidental to the enjoyment of a game. And there are one or two games which, I actually really, really enjoyed, because I hadn't been to one for ages, the Cup Final 17 against Chelsea. Because that was we played really well that game, and to be there
as well.
Yeah, well, exactly, and to be there at the time in the game and to watch us play so well when we'd been awful pretty much all that season except for the cup as usual. That was fantastic. It was really, really, really great. But for me, football's about going out with your mates and having a laugh. Really, it's not so much about the football.
100%. Myself and Trev went to the last game of the season, the Brighton game, and a lot of what you've said in various ways encompasses our day, which was meeting in the Woodbine, a few pints of Guinness, and then we had all the security stuff with COVID and everything else, which we understand needs to be done. But then it was the sterile atmosphere within the ground, and sat at different ends of the ground, not allowed to move around. Fortunate enough, we found a way that we could get together and watch the game together, and it was either that or leave. And it for me, football, I like watching leather ball being kicked around by players I support and everything else, but it's talking about football, it's chatting with mates about all sorts of bits and pieces, having a few pints. That's what it is for me. Totally. You mentioned the Chelsea game, Mark. That Chelsea game I marked down as one of my, there's loads of North London derbies. Anytime you get one over them or any of the big games and everything, but that Chelsea game in particular goes down as one of my favourite games that I've ever attended, because we went there so much as underdogs. We'd rolled our luck and beaten City in the semi-final, and we thought it couldn't work twice. And it goes down as probably one of my favourite games of me match going. I've been a season ticket holder for about 10, 11 years, I think. I think this is I'm going into my 11th year. Mark, what was your favourite game that you've attended? And then I'll ask you the same, Andy.
Old Trafford 90 when the fight occurred. That was pretty good.
Anytime we get one over there, my brothers are both Man United fans, being Irish and everything else. So yeah, I'm always pleased with that.
But, I mean, and again, it was a couple of years after I'd left Portsmouth with my first history degree or whatever, and I just went up with two blokes who didn't support art. Well, actually, Chris did. We just went up to Manchester, and my mate lived in Manchester, who I knew from a while ago. We just went around, had X amount of pints, went to the game, went back out, had a great time, and it just happened to be such a great historical event. That that was incidental to the fact that we had a great laugh. But it just turned into such a lark, such a great time. Limpar's goal, which was totally unexpected and also controversial, and then the massive ruck. It was great.
I love the code you used for the amount of pints you had. You used Roman numerals there, X. Andy, Andy, what was your favourite game and why?
I think at Highbury it was probably 84-85 against Liverpool. And we beat them. Liverpool were the top dogs at the time, and we absolutely. Don Howe put together the team at the beginning of 84-85. They were fantastic, scoring goals for fun, and we absolutely annihilated Liverpool. And it was like, that Viv Anderson steaming down the right wing, and Tony Woodcock and Brian Talbot's free kick, and it was probably the first 50,000 crowd that I'd ever been in. So that was all quite tight in there. But for me, it was also winning that put us top of the league. And it was the first time we'd been top of the league since about 1973. So it's like almost 12 years. And, this is throughout the season. And it's like, great, this is it. We're going to, this is our season to win the league. It fell away badly after that. But, that was really good. It was a nice day as well. Everything about it was just a great experience. But away games, I think the best one was 1987, the Littlewoods Cup semi-final replay at White Hart Lane, which we won 2-1, and Ian Allinson and Rocky scoring late on. And the atmosphere, I was in the top tier. Is it the Park Lane end?
Oh, you was in the Park Lanes, mate.
It was absolutely superb. And the best of it was, I lived in Cheshunt at the time. So I got a train from White Hart Lane up to Cheshunt, and all along that line is just Tottenham fans. Yeah. So I was on this train, absolutely packed, and I just got surrounded by millions of Tottenham fans, but I couldn't say anything. I had to keep my head down, and they were absolutely fuming.
And Andy, it's just as well you don't have a mobile phone back in those days, because I think Trevor had a similar incident on the tube getting back from Wembley to Baker Street, and he had good old Arsenal as his ringtone. Same thing. Trev, I might as well give you the opportunity. What's your favourite game that you've ever attended?
The favourite game that I've ever attended, apart from my first one, which I remember very well because my uncle took me. I think that the 79 final at Wembley was a great day because I was only 17 years old, and it was a wonderful day at Wembley. The highs, the lows, then the highs again has never been repeated with me of that day. To be cruising a game like that, and then to go to be pegged back to 2-2 with a couple of minutes to go, and then to have the energy to go down the other end. And people, I said it on the podcast the other day. Yeah, they say Alan Sunderland scored the winner. Rixie put a cross in for Sunderland to score the winner. But prior to that, in the 90th minute of a game at Wembley, which was an energy sapping place, Liam Brady runs half the length of the field. Before that, balls is slotted out to Rix, So that's the game that makes me smile the most. Apart from makes me smile in 2004, the Invincible season at Highbury. Middlesbrough came calling. Yeah, we've won Ray Parler in the ranks, and we went 3-1 down. We were losing 3-1, and do you know what? That team were that good in 2004. I still sat there and sat in the North Bank. It don't sound right, does it? I still sat in the North Bank that day, and I knew we wouldn't lose. That team were that good. I knew we wouldn't lose. and it was a strange feeling and a great day. I really enjoyed that game. So that's about me too, really. You put me on the spot a bit, mate.
Sorry, man. I'm putting everybody on the spot today. Listen, one other one I'm going to do. I'll put 3 managers' faces on there because other managers have been mentioned, but the ones that have had probably the most accolades in the sense of Wenger, George Graham, and Herbert Chapman. Who, Andy, would you say has been the greatest Arsenal manager of all times? And you've educated me quite a bit over this time as well. So,
difficult question because they're all great in their own different ways. But I think I'd have to go for Chapman.
Okay.
Because as Mark said, he took a team that had almost got relegated the previous season and almost won the title with them in his first season. And then put together a plan and set the club off for 20 odd years.
Mark, I think I know where you're going because you've already alluded to earlier on about Chapman. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, but my favourite manager is George Graham.
George Graham, because it's probably one of the ones you grew up with, I suppose.
Yes,
and
absolutely. Yeah.
And
he's the only Arsenal manager who's won the League Cup.
Blimey, yeah, I never thought of that.
It's true. Yeah, very true. Yeah. Very true. I must admit, you made me think differently about Chapman, especially the Chapman Wenger analogy that I put to you, and how he left the state of the club in comparison to the state of the club after 22 years of Wenger. I don't think that's all down to him, but yeah, I do. Stadium wise, obviously, I think all bar a man would say that they of these 2 stadiums, a beautiful stadium that the Emirates Stadium is, but the Old Girl Highbury is probably everybody's favourite. But give me something that you like, Mark, about the Emirates Stadium. What would you say is a positive about the stadium, and a time that you've had a really good time and witnessed a great atmosphere there?
The statues are probably the best thing about it, in my view. The best time was the last game of the season. I can't remember when it was, when we beat Villa and we got second, 16, wasn't it? And we got second and Tottenham screwed up against Newcastle. The atmosphere was fantastic. I mean, a lot of people, media was saying, oh, Arsenal was so happy they got second. It wasn't. It was because Spurs screwed up and we'd finished above them again for the 21st whatever season on the trot. It was just fantastic. It was just great. And all the Villa fans were laughing as well because they were going down. So they were having a great time as well. So the whole stadium
They were in a checkered sort of Burberry sort of checkered shirt, weren't they? I remember that game. Well, vaguely remember that game. Last game of the season is quite liquid before.
Yeah, but it was a great atmosphere because everybody was picking up. I mean, it didn't matter whether we were beating Villa because that was it was a given. Everyone was picking up that Spurs were going down and down and down, and another goal would mean we'd go above them. We did. It was just it was just bizarre. But again, it's the thing that the Emirates hasn't seen a league win, and it won't be the same for a lot of. I mean, obviously, people who haven't seen Highbury, it's their stadium, so they're happy with it. But if you've seen the 2, then there's no comparison between the 2, in my view.
My first game was Arsenal Bolton. I was fortunate for my brother had a bunch of friends that could get tickets, and on my birthday I generally went to Arsenal Bolton or Arsenal Blackburn, generally a Sam Allardyce managed team. And on 2 of the 3 occasions, Kevin Nolan was playing for them, and he scored the winning goal. And I'm actually friends with Kevin Nolan right now, and I do remind him of how he ruined my birthday on 2 occasions. But I do remember walking up in and down onto the North Bank. My wife as well had free access to the stadium because she was with the St. John's Ambulance. I was looking after the kids when the kids were younger, when the double winning side were on Islington Town Hall. She was there with Bergkamp Petit. That's a completely other story. But she had loads of access and wasn't interested. And I was just getting more and more engrossed in the football and in the club. And I remember walking up and coming out onto the North Bank towards the West Stand. I was on there, and the noise and the smells and seeing that green baize, it was just amazing. And then seeing like the pipe work and the Art Deco. My brother lives in Boston in America, and I've been to the Fenway, and the Fenway Stadium, I don't know if you've ever been out there. It's all very exposed metal rivets and everything else. Very, very much a very similar feel. Andy, trying to get into the Emirates, what's your favourite experience that you've had in there and favourite game?
It was probably, I'm pretty certain it was the first game that I took my oldest son to there. We got tickets for a game against Tottenham. It was the one where Nicholas Bentner came on as substitute and scored straight away.
Oh my word!
And for him to have that as his first game there was great. I only ever got to take him to Highbury once, but that was right at the end of 2005-06 against West Brom. But taking him to that game, it was, and that was one of the games where it was a good atmosphere. We had good seats where we could see everything. That's the good thing about the Emirates over Highbury, is that the sight lines are superb. Wherever you are, you get a good view.
It is a state-of-the-art stadium. It was designed to have exactly what you said. Unfortunately, the way modern football's gone now has turned into an entertainment rather than a sport. And it's designed out of not an awful lot of atmosphere. Wembley is sterile, more sterile than the Emirates. And I think other clubs around the world have looked at the way developments have gone and try to develop in and engineer in those sort of things. But I don't think you can engineer in tradition. I don't think you can engineer in history and the like. What I was going to ask you was, as a final question, has there ever been a question that you couldn't answer?
Probably not now. Mark mentioned it earlier. That's the digitisation of newspapers. So as long as someone asks me a question online, I can normally find an answer out quite quickly. Whereas, when Mark and I when we first started doing this sort of stuff 30 years ago, the only way you could find information was to go down to the newspaper library and look for stuff. And a lot of the time, it was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. And sometimes you'd come across something, you go, "Oh, that's interesting," and it'd be a nice find.
Yeah.
But now, if you ask me a question, who played in this game for the reserves against so and so, I could probably go online onto one or two or three websites and find the answer quite quickly.
And they are like sort of trusted website, because you can go on and find out anything and make the answer to anything you want online on some pages. But have you got a niche few site? I'm not asking you to put them on here, but a niche few sites that you would do for your research?
The British Newspaper Archive. So they've got newspapers going back to the 1700s, and they basically digitized them and made them text searchable. So we can put in, if I wanted to search for Henry Norris, I could just type in Henry Norris, Arsenal, hit the search button, and it bring up a load of hits, and we can click on them, and you can read the actual paper. It's got the actual scan of the newspaper, and it's all highlighted now, so you haven't even got to read through, sort of like columns and columns of text. They actually highlight them for you. Like I say, it's made it so much easier.
So
sometimes
long gone the days of microfiche.
No, not microfiche anymore. Yeah, but so now it's, like I say, it's become almost too easy. But sometimes you need to know what you're looking for, what sort of words to look for.
Yeah. Mark, probably no point in asking the same question, but you mentioned
you
earlier.
Can do it. I could tell you there is an answer.
Go on.
We're at an ASA meeting, and Andy had done a talk about the Royal Arsenal, and someone just said, "What motivated those men to do that?" I've got no answer for it. I don't know. I thought it was a brilliant question, because what in the 1880s, 1890s motivated skilled working class blokes to run a football club?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a football
friendship,
club, is it? It's a
friendship.
In an area that working class people in football would have been frowned upon at that time, I imagine. You know,
not really. I mean, because the Woolwich, it's different. Because
it was very military and
it was a military place, and Arsenal actually run itself as a co-op. The actual football club ran it itself as a co-op, so they wouldn't let any one person take it over, which me and Andy found as part of the George Weaver trying to take the club over in 1890. The man who owned the Invicta ground. Arsenal was very egalitarian, very from day one. It was run as a co-op, and it was really only when Norris took over that one person was sort of, there was a sort of not a committee anymore.
Hierarchy,
Yes. Norris did change the way Arsenal were run, as well as everything.
The question I was going to ask you in replacement of that one was, you mentioned that the thing that you like the most about the Emirates Stadium is the statues outside the stadium. Currently, there's Tony Adams, there's Sir Herbert Chapman, there is Dennis Bergkamp, and there's Thierry Henry. If you were to pick 1, 2, 3 statues, who would you have them of?
Well, actually, there's also Ken Fryer as well.
No, that's a bust, isn't it?
No, it's him.
Statue,
as a boy.
As a boy.
Oh, okay. Yes, there is. Yeah. When he first started, yeah. I stand corrected. Thank you several times today.
On the wall, on one of the walkway. It's difficult, really, because there's which era do you look to? Do you look to earlier era? Someone like George Levy, who no one would really know about, but who was instrumental in saving the club in 1900. Rocastle, George Graham.
Yes. Yes.
A 50s player, Tom or Whittaker, as a manager, or George Allison. There's so much that you could put into it to say who would it, who would we have? It's really difficult.
It's so true. I'm sorry, Fergus. Fergus seems to have forgotten I'm here, boys, so I'm going to butt in because he ain't asked me questions. When I see him, I'm going to fall out with him.
Questions.
But for me, Mark made a really interesting point about covering the eras with what statues you have from what era. I know we've already got a statue of Chapman. I know that. But I would love to see the next statue of Arsenal be like a bench with Chapman, Graham, me, and Wenger on that bench together. And then that would get my mind thinking, what on earth would those guys be talking about? I would love to see that. A bench and maybe a space for someone to sit between the four of them and have their picture taken.
That's a brilliant idea. That's brilliant.
That would be perfection for me, that would. Absolute perfection.
Trevor, I think if I can figure out how to do it, I'm going to clip that little bit out of this video, and we should get people behind that, because I think it's a great idea. Some like iconic managers of the club doing it. Mark, just to pin you down, and if I was to pin you down on one single person that you'd want to pick a statue of, who would you say? And if you don't want to say, don't. I'm never going to push you.
Probably George Graham.
Yeah.
Okay.
George Graham.
Andy?
George Graham.
He's found his voice now, Andy.
George Graham made Wenger's life easier. Because Wenger inherited, I've been shouted down for this before, but I don't care. Wenger inherited a defence. Probably when Wenger picked his defence in his first game or his first few games, those players probably had 1,000 appearances for Arsenal between them at that time, including Seaman, of course. And that laid the foundations for Wenger to get off to the start he did. I don't care what anyone. I'm not knocking Wenger, because Wenger did build another side before the slippery slope down started, in my view. Yeah. But that George Graham, it was a massive influence on the start of Arsene Wenger's career. And people shout at me about it, but I don't care. In my mind, that's a fact.
What you've got to remember, though, Trevor, is that at that time, a lot of people were saying, as Rioch was there and Wenger's start, the defence was getting too old and they needed to be replaced. So what Wenger did was he extended their careers.
Absolutely.
They all had 4, 5, 6 years after he joined. when everyone else was saying they're all getting too old. Dixon, his legs are gone. Winterburn, his legs are gone. But they carried on, and it was because of what Wenger introduced into the club.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I understand that. Yeah, and you're right. But they were there. And it's Graham for me. And the other question he didn't ask me, boys, the best atmosphere I've seen at the Emirates was the first game of the 96-97 season when we played Leicester at home and we beat them 4-3. And when that fourth goal went in...
96-97, we weren't in the Emirates, Trevor, just to...
not 96-97, sorry.
Sorry, he crucified me, so I had to do it.
2017-18, whenever it was. I've got 96-97.
Think about Trevor, he's getting old and, his memory's going, so,
Anyway, rewind. We can edit that bit out. Although
no, I'm not. That's staying in.
2016-17 season or 17-18, one of the two. We played Leicester at home and we won 4-3. And when the fourth goal went in against Leicester that day at the Emirates, that was comparable to any atmosphere I've seen at the Emirates, including the North London derby. So that was my favourite atmosphere at the Emirates. Right, swiftly moving on, Fergus, and we'll find the edit button to take that out, mate.
So far, there's very little to edit. There's nothing coming out so far of what I can see. The statue I'd love to see, and I love the idea of the bench. I think that's fantastic. I love the idea of representing the eras. But I think Ian Wright, George Graham, Rocky Rocastle, any of those three, but the Rocky Rocastle Ian Wright hug, I'd love to see that commemorated in bronze, and I would like to see a statue of Wenger out there because I was a huge fan. He was a huge influence on my experience of Arsenal Football Club. Before we go, we touched on a couple of former Arsenal.
Hold on. You didn't ask me my statue. I haven't had a statue.
Not? Oh, Jesus, no. Sorry. Go on then.
We're not editing this bit out.
No, we're not. I did ask you, but Trevor jumped in. Sorry.
Yeah, you did, yeah. I would go back to the very beginning. I'd have David Danskin.
Wow.
The man who started the club.
Good call. What a call that is. Yeah. What a great call. Yeah.
Jesus, this has been the best hour and a half I've ever talked about Arsenal in such a long time. But what I was going to say before we finish up is Lance Corporal Robert Houston of the 17th Middlesex Battalion, who played for Arsenal. He disembarked in France on the 17th of November 2015 and was killed in action on the 13th of November 1916 on the front line near the near the end of the Battle of the Somme. Was one of the people, and I thank you, Mark, for putting this in the comments to help us out. And leading stroker Albert Maynard. He was born
Stoker.
Sorry, I'm dyslexic. I told you this before. You should be reading this, not me. Leading stoker Albert Maynard was born 9 days before the end of the First World War in 1918 in Tunbridge Wells in Kent. A goalkeeper who appeared for the Arsenal A team in the Southern League in January 1939. Assisting, he was soon he was hospitalized after returning from the war in the Weald once. Oh, help me out here, Trev. Come on.
No, he joined the Royal Navy as a submariner. And sadly,
that's further down.
Yeah. Sadly, the submarine was lost in the Mediterranean in 23rd of March 1943. He's only 24.
Wow.
It's food for thought, isn't it? Really, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you know what impresses me? I have a lot of thoughts about the war. Some of my relatives, as most of us have relatives, were lost during the war. Mm-hmm. But the fact that you boys can pull up statistics from an Arsenal A team in the Southern League in the early 1900s just is so impressive, boys. And before, I know Fergus is going to wrap it up, so I'm going to get in front of him and wrap my bit up, and then I'll pass it over to Fergus. You've made my enjoyment of Arsenal so much greater since I discovered you boys' website a few years ago and started reading your books. And for that, I'm very appreciative. Although I'm an old fella myself, I'm very appreciative. And I'm always learning. Whenever I open your book or your website, I learn something. Something new. It comes into my head about the Arsenal. And it's happened many times just during the course of our hour and a half conversation today. So I know Fergus is going to do it, but personally for me, you have no idea how much I've enjoyed this hour and a half. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you boys. I hope that one day we can do it again. I seriously hope that the updated version of this book is allowed to be published soon, because I think it's important that history is updated. And as you say, not just current history, previous history, because you boys are always working to find out more. So I'll shut up now and I'll just leave it with a big thank you, Mark and Andy. Very much appreciated. And I'll let Fergus finish off, mate.
Yeah, it has been just over the hour and a half. Bearing in mind that we said this would take 45 minutes at tops to an hour. And I think I've jumped through so much that we could do this again and again, pick an era, and we could do stuff about it. I really do thank you guys very, very much. I've not only learned, but I've enjoyed this afternoon so much. And it's good to see what you guys do and everything else. So thanks for coming on. The one thing I would like to say before we go, and it's just on remembrance and so on, Tony Eastlake sadly got stabbed on Essex Road last weekend. And our good friend of the show, Ruth Beck, is putting up and doing some commemorative cards off his flower stall. She's done other things like the art of the Arsenal station. She's done the Cronky Out sort of artwork. If people would like to go there, have a look at her shop. It's at Este, if you do Ruth Beck art. And also there is a GoFundMe, which is GoFundMe E245A549. And all the money that is raised for there will go to Ellen Maggs, who's organising everything for Tony. And it's just senseless that people get done like that. Listen, thank you very, very much for joining us. I've really, really appreciated it. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we do, guys. Mark, Andy, do you want to just tell people one last thing of where they can find you and how they can subscribe, or if they want to follow you or anything like that? Do you do Twitter? Do you do Facebook? Do you do Instagram? Do you do any of that? Or are you just old school internet?
Right. So, yeah, we're both on Twitter and websites galore. So I'm at Guna_AK on Twitter. I tweet loads of Arsenal stuff that's really based around what we've just been talking about, and a few other bits as well. We've got our own website called thearsenalhistory.com, which has flashed up on here a few times. But we've also got another one where we're putting loads of old Arsenal programs, handbooks, books, anything to do with Arsenal. They're all complete issues of these publications, and they're all free to view. There's no fee for it at all, and it's called thearsenalcollection.org.uk.
Amazing.
Mark, anything to say?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter as well. I think I'm Royal Arsenal MRA, but I can't remember. No, I tweet the time. I mean, I do quite a few stuff with Trevor. He looks at my stuff now and again and does bits and pieces, which is nice. No, thank you. No, it's been really nice, actually. It's been really nice discussion.
Great, yeah, really enjoyed it.
Really good.
Where do you boys keep all your programs and documents and all that? I mean, I've got a few thousand programs, I would imagine, stashed away. But I mean, I'm nowhere near a full collection, nowhere near what you boys have got. Where do you keep it all?
On a hard drive. It's all scanned in there.
It's scanned in there, yeah.
So you don't actually keep...
He's got his wife in the shed, and he's got a 4-bedroom house full of books.
Okay. She nags me, but never mind.
All right, listen, guys, you have been watching an Arsenal podcast by Arsenal fans for Arsenal fans. As you can see, that's exactly what we've done. You know, we don't do it for clicks. We don't do it for anything else. We do it because we love Arsenal Football Club. If you like what we do, subscribe, follow us. I'll just tell your mates. Thanks very much. Have a great summer. We'll try and do a few more of these, but not many before the season starts. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks again, guys.
You've been listening to Guns and Yellow Ribbons, an Arsenal podcast by Arsenal fans for Arsenal fans. Follow us on Facebook at Guns and Yellow Ribbons and Twitter at Guns and Ribbons. And remember to rate and review us too.